Good morning, everyone. Today's Tuesday, September 13th, 2022. It's 9 a.m. We are here in council chambers for the hearing examiner agenda of this date. I'm calling the hearings to order at this time. I do want to make some preliminary comments for those of you that are not accustomed to the process in the city of Cape Coral, which is a little bit different than the process that's followed in other jurisdictions. In our jurisdiction, the process is as follows. The clerk will read the introduction to the case, and then the clerk will swear in anyone who is testifying. City staff testifies regarding compliance with public notice, and if public notice is found to have complied with the statutory requirements, we go forward with the hearing. Otherwise, we do not go forward with the hearing. Assuming public notice has been properly found, the applicant will go first, presents their entire case. City staff goes second and presents their entire case. I say it that way because in the city of Cape Coral, the applicant bears the responsibility of addressing all of the criteria that apply to their specific request. After city staff goes second, public comment is next. Public comment must all be under oath, and all testimony is given from the podium we have on to my left, your right, the podium for public comment. It has the same audio and video capability as the podium that is in front of me here. If you are here for public comment, as I mentioned, all testimony must be under oath, and it must be at the podium. We do not allow testimony from your seat, and that also applies for the applicant and staff. Once public comment is closed, it will not be reopened, so please, if you are here for public comment, make your comments comprehensive during your time to speak. Following the closure of public comment, the applicant responds to questions, makes any final comments, staff does the same, and then the hearing is closed. If you have a cell phone with you today, please turn it off or silence it, and if possible, take any cell phone conversations outside the room. If you wish to have private conversations, please move away as far as you can from the speaker's lectern so we do not accidentally record your conversation. If your conversation is recorded, it becomes public record, for better or worse. So please be aware of that. Anyone who provides testimony other than the applicant and staff is requested to fill out a public participation card for two reasons. First, we can properly spell your name, and if you wish a copy of the hearing examiner recommendation or order, as the case may be, please provide your email contact information. However, also please be cognizant that once you do provide that email contact information, it is public record. So we are doing the hearings a little bit out of order today. We are taking hearing number B, that is the rezoning case, first, and we are taking case number A, which is a variance case, second. So with those preliminary comments, I'm going to turn it over to our very competent clerk's recording secretary to call the case. Thank you.
Case RZN 22-000024 is an applicant-initiated request for rezoning 3 parcels from professional P zoning to multifamily low RML zoning. The 3 parcels total an area of plus or minus 4,992 square feet or 0.94 acres and are addressed as 1216, 122, and 13 Southeast 8th Place. Any persons giving testimony today, if you are able, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. Anthony Santor, Associate Planner for the Cape Coral Planning Department. This case was publicly noticed 3 ways, with an ad being placed in the paper of record, a letter distributed to the property owners in a 500-foot adjacency radius, and a sign being placed on the properties in question.
Thank you. I will find that proper notice was given. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mazurkowitz.
Morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. Joe Mazurkowitz, President of BJM Consulting, here on behalf of this application and the owners of City Place LLC. This particular site is on Southeast 8th Place. The address is 1216, 1222, and 1302 Southeast 8th Place. It is made up of 2 parcels, both fronting the Southeast 8th Place, and as the clerk said, just under 41,000 square foot and just shy of an acre. Future land use is mixed use and has an existing professional zoning. Its site is located in the infill area and is serviced by all three city utilities. We're requesting a zoning change for the entire site from the existing P professional to multifamily RML, 16 units an acre. We're doing so as that is consistent with the regulations limiting the size of the site. Because it's less than an acre, we can't ask for the RMM. As I said earlier, the site is just south of Nicholas Parkway, part of the area formerly known as City Centrum. The site is surrounded on three sides by multifamily RML zoning and developments with professional zoning and uses to the north. As such, this application will allow for the actual squaring off, if you will, of the multifamily in the area and will be a nice buffer to the existing professional to the north. The site meets all 6 of the review criteria to support the RML. The proposed zoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the underlying land use of MX multifamily. The site fronts on Southeast 8th Place. This is surrounded by existing multifamily development. The full range of multifamily uses allowed in the RML zoning are consistent and compatible with the surrounding existing developments. And the RML zoning will help meet the identified need for market-priced apartments in the city of Cape Coral. The development allowed by RML zoning will be compatible with the existing surrounding developments, and the RML zoning as requested is one of the residential zoning categories allowed in the MX land use, and the assembly of the 3 parcels into one site for development will allow for less driveways along Southeast 8th Place and provide for development with future potential adverse impacts on the surrounding uses. The location of the parcel, along with its limited size, make it well-qualified candidates for the RML zoning. We have reviewed staff's report, and we would at this time like to make it part of our presentation. Also, Madam Hearing Examiner, I forgot before I started this, I would like to be recognized as an expert witness based on my previous appearances here and my vita that we have sent to you, my CV that was sent to you earlier.
Years ago, as I recall. I will find you as an expert based upon your CV, which you provided a couple of years ago, and also based upon your testimony and other hearings regarding issues which are comparable to those before us today. And having said that, do you wish your testimony as of this moment, retroactive to the beginning of this hearing, to be considered expert as well?
Yes, Madam Hearing Examiner, thank you.
I will do so, and I will find you as an expert.
And at this time, we would respectfully request a recommendation of City Council to approve this, and we will address any questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Good morning again, Madam Hearing Examiner. Anthony Santor, Associate Planner. Credentials are on file with the city clerks, and at this time, before beginning the presentation, I would like to be recognized as an expert.
I haven't seen your credentials. So
Well, that was going to be one of the things that I was going to state. As I have not presented to you yet, and you have not seen my credentials, if you would like to voir dire, I'm here to answer any questions that you may have to affirm my status.
Why don't let's do it this way. I'm sure you'll be back again because you're a member of staff now, and by the way, welcome. Why don't we not do it this time and submit your CV in the future?
Very good.
And I'm not commenting positive or negatively on your credentials.
I understand.
Thank you.
All right, so the application we have before you, as was stated by the applicant, this is a single applicant that represents the property owner for all 3 parcels, addressed as 1216, 1222, and 1302 on Southeast 8th Place. They are along Southeast 8th Place near Nicholas Parkway, as we will see when we get to the map. Approximately 40,990 square feet, just under an acre. They're in the infill for the urban services, and they're requesting a rezone from professional to the RML district. The site is 3 parcels. It is located along the roadway. They are currently vacant and undeveloped. The site does have access to all 3 utilities, as was mentioned before. A little bit on the zoning. So there used to be a multifamily zoning, R3, which was back in the 1990s when the map was first adopted. It had been R3. It was changed to professional in 2007. Along with the future land use map, which had maintained the multifamily and was changed to mixed use in 2003, and then for the southernmost parcel in 2005. The applicant, as he was up here stated, he's looking to provide new future development for multifamily housing in that location. So here we can see a map of the location. You'll see Nicholas Parkway to the north, the subject properties highlighted in the blue. And then here we can see the subject parcels and the current zoning. You will see that the professional zoning extends down into the RML neighborhood. The request here is that these 3 parcels be rezoned to RML and that the residential neighborhood, multifamily neighborhood extend closer towards the Nicholas Parkway. So we analyze this as required through our land development code and the comprehensive plan. So the proposed zoning of RML is consistent with our current future land use map classifications, MX, as well as the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, which we will see a little bit farther down in the presentation. And then we examined whether the full range of uses allowed in the proposed district will be compatible. The district is low density and includes single-family detached duplexes and multifamily. The area to the southwest and east, as we saw on the map, is predominantly RML, and it's already developed with many low-density residential units, mainly duplexes. The area to the north is predominantly professional, and it is already built out with some professional offices. The rezone will be compatible with the existing uses and complies with that requirement. Another requirement, whether the range of uses allowed in the proposed zoning district will be compatible with the existing and potential uses in the area under consideration. As was stated, around the development already, a majority of the parcels are already RML, with the P sites, the professional, being developed with low-scale commercial uses already existing. It will be compatible with the existing and potential uses in the area. Another criteria was whether the proposed zoning district will serve a community need or broader public purpose. The comprehensive plan does state that the city has a well-documented need for multifamily development, and this will help to serve as an infill for that need. So it will be providing community need and does meet that requirement. Additionally, the characteristics of the proposed rezone are suitable for uses permitted. As we've discussed, the site is an assemblage of 3 parcels for just under an acre on a 2-lane local roadway. It is removed from the main intersection. It is on a minor arterial, and it is buffered by professional zones. So the area is suitable for the proposed uses in the zoning district. Another criteria is whether a zoning district other than the district requested will create fewer potential adverse impacts to existing uses. After review, the RML district is the lowest low-scale residential district allowable to meet multifamily. As was stated, the RMM is not applicable here, as the minimum requirements for that is 1 acre, and the density requirements on it are out of scale with the surrounding neighborhood. So in analyzing the comprehensive plan, we'd like to show that the project is in compliance with some of the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. So the Chapter 3 housing element, it is consistent with the main goal of providing, multifamily diverse housing within the city to fill the need. It is also compliant with Chapter 4 Policy 1.7 of the comprehensive plan, which is the requirements for multifamily housing and the siting locations of that. So we examined it in proximity to major roadways, proximity to non-residential land uses, transitioning from commercial uses to less intensive uses, and an assemblage of opportunities and adjacencies to existing multifamily residential. And as we go through these, you will see that the goals are consistent with each one of those. And in the sake of time, I think we've covered the distances, so I won't go through these too hard. But you can just see that it is consistent with all of the...
I'm a big fan of testimony, so why don't we go back and go
Okay.
through them? Thank you.
So you can see, examining the first criteria, the proximity to major roadways, the RML site being requested is about 250 feet from a minor arterial roadway. That's the Nicholas Parkway East. The site is also a quarter of a mile from two major intersections, one to the east, which is Country Club Boulevard and Nicholas Parkway, and one to the west, which is Cultural Park Boulevard and Academy Boulevard. And so it is consistent with that guideline. The next policy is proximity to non-residential uses. An appropriate location would be within a quarter mile of non-residential uses, such as the commercial and professional. The site is within close proximity, but sharing a northmost property line with the professional uses, so it is consistent with guideline number 2. Also transitioning from commercial uses to less intensive uses for guideline point number 3. The site is situated directly between non-residential future land use, which is the CP and the professional to the north, and the residential land uses to the south, which are RML and MF. Most of the residential land uses in the south are already multifamily. There are some existing single-family units that are in there, scattered about on single sites. And the zoning classification, the RML would allow for single-family development to happen in the future if necessary or if the market demands. So the project is consistent with guideline point number 3. And finally, the last guideline requirement, the assemblage opportunities adjacent to existing multifamily residential. The site is just under an acre. The area to the southeast and west abutting the property, they do share the same zoning, and when combined, you do end up with an acre that exceeds about 3 acres. The required 3 acres in size, consistent with the guideline. So when you look at it from an assemblage opportunity, you have the ability to be the 3-acre or greater parcel. So this is consistent with guideline number 4 of policy 1.7. We also examined it in relation to our commercial siting guidelines to determine if the current zoning is more favorable to the proposed zoning. And what we saw was that the site is consistent with only 3 components of the guidelines: a major intersection, assembly, and intrusion, and it is inconsistent with 5 components of the guidelines, those being adequate depth, compactness, integration, access, and ownership pattern. Given that the site is a poor candidate for future commercial and professional development. So it is our recommendation that, given all this criteria, that the parcels be rezoned to the RML district as submitted by the applicant. We have not received any communications or any objections or recommendation or voices of support from the public at this time.
Thank you.
I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you. I have no questions. This is a public hearing. Are there members of the public who wish to provide input or testimony on this matter? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the applicant. Mr. Mazurkowitz, please. Mr. Mazurkowitz, we've had conversation in the past about the professional zoning district and its future in the world of zoning, and I'm assuming that your application today conforms to those discussions.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's the move away from professional because of the conditions and the culture of the 21st century, and the RML is a much more appropriate use for this property right here.
Thank you. Do you have any other testimony?
The only thing we would like to do is we would like to include staff's presentation in our record.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can we have staff up, please? Do you wish to include the staff report into your presentation as well?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. Any further testimony?
None at this time.
All right. Thank you very much. At this time, I'll close the hearing. I will recommend that the rezoning go forward as requested by the applicant and as supported by staff. Hearing number 8, please. Madam Clerk, thank you.
Case VAR 22-000033, address 2726 Southwest 38th Terrace. Applicant, Quality Home Estate Incorporated. Quality Home Estate Incorporated is requesting a variance of 8.69 feet to the minimum 80-foot lot width at the building setback line as required in LDC Table 4.1.3.b to allow a site with a lot width of 71.31 feet in the single-family residential R1 district. The site is located in an area dominated with single-family homes. A larger parent site was split by a former owner in 2004 without city review and approval. The current owner purchased the site in 2018. Staff's Recommended findings show the applicant has met all 7 variance standards found in LDC Section 3.4.3. If granted, the variance will allow the owner of the site to construct a single-family home with a front setback of 32.7 feet. Any persons giving testimony today, if you are able, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, Mr. Strube.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Mike Struve, Planning Team Coordinator with the City Planning Division. This case was noticed, and that included placing an ad in the news press 10 days in advance of this hearing date, sending letters to all surrounding property owners within 500 feet of the site, and then posting a sign on the subject site as well.
Thank you. We'll find the proper notice was given. I do have a question. My understanding is that you received and passed along to me a document or documents from the applicant's representative that were received, I believe, on Monday? Or possibly, I received it on Friday.
Yes, I did.
All right, I wanted to make sure of that because obviously that's past the deadline and will not be.
That's correct. That was a revised presentation, and I think that I had indicated to the applicant at that time that those materials were unlikely to be accepted, but it's my job to forward them on to you anyway and let you make that decision.
No, I appreciate that. I just wanted to confirm that the date that you did receive them.
Yes.
So, thank you. All right. Mr. Hartzell, you're up. I see before me a document. This is not the document you submitted untimely, correct?
That's correct.
This is the one you submitted last week.
The presentation that I am prepared to make at the moment is based on the documents that were submitted on last Wednesday.
All right. And the way we do this in Cape Coral is you're certainly welcome to verbally augment whatever it is that you are presenting that was timely submitted, but no documents would be accepted that were not timely provided. While we're on the subject, I know that there were several, perhaps I should say numerous, emails received in opposition to this variance. I don't want to jump ahead, but I do want to tell you that if you do not feel at this time that you can, that your client and you can properly address them, that you don't have the time to do that, we can certainly give a continuance to give you the appropriate time to review and address the concerns expressed, because they will be addressed by the applicant, the public in this hearing. So I'm offering you this opportunity if you choose to take it.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I suppose I should start just by putting on the record that I am Steve Hartzell with Pavis Law Firm. I am here on behalf of the applicant, just for the record. I know that you know me.
I appreciate that. Sorry for jumping ahead.
I appreciate that offer. Frankly, the members of the public will always have an opportunity to testify, so there really isn't any way that I can actually be adequately prepared, as it were, or at least anticipate what members of the public may testify to. So I don't believe that it's necessary at this point in time to continue the hearing. I might not know what they say at the next hearing when they show up either. They're not required to submit their documents ahead of time, so I am in the position of having to rebut or address whatever comments might come up at the hearing based on my presentation. So I'm prepared to move forward with the presentation. I do apologize. I understand the city's process with regard to submitting documents in advance. As I was preparing on Monday, I guess, yesterday, I started making sort of my standard revisions and edits, and as I did that, there was some reorganization, and that's what I had submitted to Mr. Struve, not realizing that the order of the slides. So yes, I believe that the slides that you are looking at here as part of my main presentation have not been changed.
I realize it's only the second time here, Mr. Hartzell, so you get a buy on your attempt to submit late, but but that's okay.
It was just an attempt to keep everybody apprised of what's going on.
Appreciate it. And just to augment my comments, we do have, and I hope that you did, I'm sure you did, because Mr. Struve's very thorough. There are a number of emails that came in yesterday, or I received them yesterday anyway, and so I didn't want you to feel like you were disadvantaged, but I'm hearing you say that you're okay to go forward, so it's really a decision to be made now, either way, so.
Nope, I understand that, I appreciate that, and I will have some rebuttal materials to prepare or to present as well after the members of the public have spoken.
Not taking materials, Mr. Hartzell. You can testify verbally, but we're not accepting materials at the hearing from the applicant. That's why I'm offering you the opportunity to continue. It's up to you, but I don't want documents that are presented for the first time in the hearing. If you want to take a couple minutes to talk to your client, that's fine, or if you're ready to go forward, or whatever.
Demonstrative documents as opposed to substantive documents. In other words, again, and I apologize, I know I'm not familiar with the Cape Coral process, but it would be my understanding that you wouldn't want to take substantive materials at the hearing, but demonstrative materials that don't go to the substance, but rather, particularly in terms of rebuttal materials. I'm not arguing your process, but if I'm not aware of what the public or others may speak until they've actually spoken, my only real opportunity is after they've spoken to present my rebuttal materials as they were. And again, to the extent that they're demonstrative as opposed to substantive, I certainly can understand where the hearing examiner would look at substantive materials and say, you're not able to accept those based on the rules.
Well, I guess the question devolves to what do you consider demonstrative versus substantive?
I would suggest maybe a proffer, and then it will be up to the hearing examiner to make the decision as to whether they are demonstrative or substantive. Again, my ability to describe, as a lawyer, I talk a lot, and a picture...
I have that same problem at home.
A picture may be worth 1,000 words, which is why I have prepared at least a few demonstrative slides that I think would speed the process up. But I am prepared to go forward. I am prepared to make a proffer to you and to defer to your judgment with regard to whether they are demonstrative or substantive.
And the dilemma here is if I decide in a manner that you don't find acceptable, and you feel that prejudices your case because there were seven emails that were provided prior to today, I wouldn't want you to feel like you are you're prejudiced. I'm not saying how I'm going to roll. Obviously, I have no idea how I'm going to roll, but I don't want you to feel any disadvantage. And the other thing, while we're doing housekeeping before starting this hearing, or actually we've started the hearing, is do we have the city staff member who is involved in the initial part of this available to testify? I'm not asking you, Mr. Hartzell. You're not in charge of the city, for better or worse.
So for the record, Mike Struve, Planning Team Coordinator with the Planning Division. If you mean the staff member that had some of the initial conversations with the applicant, that was a person, that was a customer service rep. We've had a lot of turnover at that position. That person has actually left the city and is now working in the private sector, having nothing to do with this case, but he's no longer with the city.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Your Honor, if I may, just for the record, the codes,
Would you identify yourself?
John Niclario, Assistant City Attorney, for the record. The code does not distinguish between substantive and demonstrative documents and evidence. The code just says documentary evidence shall be made available to the decision-making body or the hearing examiner and to the staff no later than 3 business days prior to the hearing. So just throw that for the record. There's no distinguishment by the type of documents. Just documentary evidence, period.
I appreciate that, and that's kind of the way I'm leaning as well. I'm not trying to make you twist in the wind here, Mr. Hartzog. I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable if you have documents of whatever type that have not been provided prior to today. And we, in the years that at least I've served as this function, don't accept any kind of documents from applicants. I think Mr. Mazurkowitz, to his sorrow, could, if he were to testify in that regard, would testify in that regard. He's sitting in the back. So I just don't want you to feel like there's any, that you don't have an opportunity to present a complete case. So based on the update from the Assistant City Attorney, I would not be accepting any type of documents, demonstrative or otherwise. If you want to give me city codes, I'll look at them. I don't think that was what you had in mind.
No, ma'am. I, again, appreciate your position and appreciate the city codes. I'm prepared to make the presentation today, and as I said, I don't know how it would change 2 weeks from now. As you pointed out, there are a number of letters of objection. The public is not required to put their objections into writing.
You've mentioned that already. Thank you, and I'm aware of that. But the only way it would change is that you would have an opportunity to review I believe it's 7. Maybe I'm just going from memory. The emails that you would have an opportunity to review and substantively address the contents of those emails. Instead of having to kind of do it on the fly today. That's the only thing. And I don't want to belabor this. If you're willing to move forward, I'm willing to move forward.
Great.
So
We're willing to move forward.
onward then. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, I'm Steve Hartzell. I'm here on behalf of the applicants, Anton and Christine Meir, who are the owners of the property through their WNCC corporate entity. With me today are Hans Bakey, who is CEO and owner of Quality Estate Home, and Maurizio Ferrara, who is the builder. And as I said, I'm Steve Hartzell with Pavis Law Firm. I would like to begin perhaps with some housekeeping qualifications. We've provided a copy of the background of Mr. Bakey and Mr. Ferrara. I submit their background and experience in the respective fields for Mr. Bakey of home building and Mr. Ferrara of general contracting. You can see in slide number 4 their experience in this area. And in slide number 5, they have provided numerous examples of homes that they have built together in the city of Cape Coral, some of which are completed and some of which are under construction at this time. Just to get it out of the way, I would request that you accept them as experts qualified to give their opinions in response to questions that you might pose or that might be posed with regard to their respective areas of general contracting and home building.
I would like them to testify on those subjects before I make a decision either way. I have had an opportunity to look at your submission from last week.
Thank you very much. Also, for purposes of getting it into the records so that I don't forget, I would like to incorporate the staff report along with the staff report attachments and the staff presentation, which is coming up.
I don't think you can incorporate the presentation that hasn't been given yet, Mr. Hartzell, but we can address that down the road. But yes, I'll incorporate the staff report as requested. Thank you.
Certainly. I would also like to incorporate our PowerPoint and the exhibits previously presented.
So noted and agreed to.
Thank you. Starting out, we appreciate the assistance that Mr. Struve has provided on behalf of the city before I got involved, while Mr. Bakey was trying to address the variance on his own. As you've probably gleaned from your review of the application and staff report, neither the owners nor the builders anticipated this variance being necessary. You might also, pardon me.
Would you like some water? We have bottled water if you need it. Okay.
Don't drink from the fountains. Thank you very much. Okay, neither the Mr. Maurizi or Mr. Ferrara nor Mr. Bakey anticipated the variance being necessary. You probably also gleaned from the letter that I provided as part of the presentation from Mr. Bakey that English is not their first language. They're builders, they're good with their hands, but less well-equipped to make a variance presentation and to testify. On the other hand, I can't put together a swing set without a detailed set of instructions and a YouTube tutorial. So I won't testify as to building, but I will try to provide you with a more thorough review of the variance background, and then I will ask them to confirm the accuracy of that overview and respond to any questions that you might have. We're here this morning with regard to an application for a building permit at the home built at to be built at 2726 Southwest 38th Terrace. As the staff report shows, the lot was the result of a lot split of the previously platted lots 56 and 57. In 2004, those lots were split by virtue of quitclaim deeds that showed a different property line configuration than the original platted lots. The result left this subject parcel with a larger, more conforming lot size, but with an irregular west property line, which prevents the property from meeting the 80-foot width requirement unless the front setback is inordinately large, close to 53 or 54 feet, instead of the 25-foot front setback. I think it's important to note at this stage that the variance that we're requesting today relates to clearing up the old lot split problem that occurred back in 2004. It's not about increasing development on this particular piece of property. You'll see from the aerial that we provided, on the right-hand side here is the subject property that's outlined in blue. To the left is the other half of the remaining lot 57, which you'll note is already built on. You'll also be able to tell there that the remaining lot 57 doesn't have the 50 or the 80-foot lot width either. So far, nobody that I've spoken to has been able to really explain how it is that there is a house that's constructed on this property with a substandard lot that didn't get caught, and as best I've been able to determine, there is no variance that has corrected that lot size problem on the parcel to the west, notwithstanding we're here today on the property before you. Our variance request is to allow that the width be 71.4 feet instead of the 80-foot wide at the front setback line. This would mean that the front setback is still over 31 feet, which is substantially more than the required 25-foot front setback. In all other respects, the lot and the home will meet the R1 residential standards. This is a survey of the property as well. Now, as Mr. Bakey explained in his summary letter and timeline, he and Mr. Ferrara initially met with Jim Cornu from the city staff, showing him a site plan, and confirmed with him what they proposed on the lot would be permissible.
I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Yes.
I really do apologize. I'm curious about dates on this timeline, and I know your clients have the factual information, but you've indicated that they're not conversant in English as perhaps you and I might be. So if you have that timeline information, I know it was part of what was submitted originally, That would be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, that timeline is here as well as part of the staff report as well.
This is exactly what I'm looking for. Thank you. Would you mind having this slide up while you go through this particular rendition?
Certainly.
Thank you.
He and Mr. Farrar initially met with Mr. Cornu from the city, showed him the site plan, and confirmed with him what they proposed on the lot would be permissible. Subsequent to that, their architect, Hayden Voles, finished the plans after consulting again with Mr. Cornu and submitted the building permit application to the city in November of 2021. This is a more detailed timeline showing when it was that they signed the agreement in April of 2021. They hired the architect in April of 2021. May of 2021, they requested information from the building department regarding the setbacks. There was some uncertainty due to the lot shape, and that's when they met with Jim Cornu. May, again, they talked with Mr. Cornu and received confirmation from Mr. Cornu to Hayden Voles, their architect. July, the plans were done. In August, there was an energy calculation. August of 2021, they contacted the contractors with regard to pool and windows and other things. In September of 2021, truss plans and engineering were ordered. They finalized the architectural plans in October of 2021. They submitted those plans in November of 2021. The home is owned by a family of 5. All 3 of the children are over 18 years old. As I mentioned, the property was purchased by their parents, Anton and Christine Meir, with the intention of using it as a vacation home where the family could regularly gather. It requires 4 bedrooms to accommodate the adults in individual rooms, anticipating 5 adults with the possibility of spouses or significant others, or even perhaps grandchildren, hopefully in the future. They also plan for a correspondingly sized pool and terrace. As you may be aware, the city's permitting system has functioned less efficiently than both staff and applicants would hope. The permit has been under review, or had been under review, for 4 months. During that time, Mr. Ferrara and Mr. Bakey decided it would be prudent for them to begin ordering the materials so that they would be prepared to start construction due to the supply chain problems and, as I mentioned, the significantly long time that construction plans were under review. So that's when they began buying the materials and stockpiling those. It was only when the building permit was unexpectedly denied due to the 71-foot width issue at the front setback that they ran into problems. While the front setback is easily met due to the irregular configuration of the lot, the 80-foot width can't be met without a total redesign of the home. Here's the site plan, and frankly, we enlarged it so that it would be a little bit easier to see that. With the home laid out on the property, you can see at the blue line, the lot width is 71.31 feet. At the 32-foot setback, the gold or yellow line shows the 80-foot width and what impact that would have on the house as it was designed. Let me back up. These are the plans. They show the front elevation and the rear elevation. You can see that it is a two-story home. The front of the home is at basically one story, 12 to 15 or 12 to 16 feet high, and then the second story goes up to 24 feet. This just shows the right and the left elevations. This is a portion of the site plan. The stars represent the windows and the glazing, all of which was purchased and has been stockpiled. These match up to the material or the invoices that were provided to the staff as part of the application and that we've incorporated into the presentation, demonstrating the costs that have been incurred prior to this point in time. And this then is the site plan laid out on the aerial, which helps you to have a better perspective on where the house would be located relative to the other homes on either side of it. We would submit that the proposed variance is the minimum that will allow reasonable use of the property. It is irregularly shaped, which resulted from that unapproved lot split in 2004. The irregularly shaped property results in two parcels where the minimum 80-foot lot width could not be met without creating an unreasonably large front and backyard or an unreasonably small home. Since the lot is irregularly shaped, it required a custom design to meet the side setbacks at the various distances where the lot lines change. You'll note that because of the angles on that west property line, which in this picture is to your right, in order to meet the 7.5-foot side setbacks on both the east and the west side, this house design is, again, uniquely designed or custom designed to fit these particular lot lines. The house was also designed so that the 32.5-foot setback is greater than the minimum 25-foot front setback. And you'll note that it's also more than the setback of the home to the left in this slide, which is east. But it's not as much as the 54-foot setback to the property on the west side or to the right. As I said, it meets all of the setback requirements. It meets the side setbacks, it meets the front setbacks, it meets the rear setbacks. And from a compatibility or comparable to the other homes in the neighborhood, you'll note that this home is set back less than the 54 feet of the property to the right, but more than the 25 feet of the property to the left. Looking at the variance standards, I want to just clarify for your purposes, and I've explained to Mr. Struve as well, the label says staff report. What we did obviously was pull the standards from the staff report. Much of what you see in the text under the bold standards is exactly corresponding to what was in the staff report, but not all of it. As I went through it and modified or clarified that, the text I want you to understand is my text, and even though much of it is the same as the staff's, I don't want it to be represented as all of the staff's.
I appreciate that. I was kind of wondering about that, so thank you for the clarification.
The finding's the same, but the text is mine. Looking at Standard 1, special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, not applicable to other lands and structures. As I've said numerous times, it's an irregular lot compared to most platted home sites because of the split that took place in 2004. It has sufficient area and depth. The site lacks the required 25-foot width, or I'm sorry, the required 80-foot width at the 25-foot front setback line. The configuration of the site lacks sufficient width to allow development at or immediately behind the front setback line. Special conditions exist that aren't applicable to most other properties in the R1 district. This is the location of the site in the larger neighborhood. You can see to the north is Southwest 38th Street, on the south, Southwest 38th Terrace, and on the west is, I've forgotten, Southwest 27th Court. The second standard is that special conditions and circumstances don't result from the actions of the applicant. As we pointed out, the subject site was created by the lot split in 2004 by a previous property owner. The applicants acquired the site in 2018. They were unaware of the history involved in the alteration of the original boundaries, particularly given the fact that there was a home built on the west side of the property and also on the other half of that lot split. Since the boundaries were altered by a previous owner, special conditions and circumstances exist that don't result from the actions of the applicant. Third standard is granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that's denied by the regulation to other buildings, structures, or in the same zoning district. As the staff has pointed out, granting the variance will not constitute a special privilege. It's the narrowness of this altered residential property in conjunction with the minimum width at the building setback requirement. Those two factors contribute to the larger front setback that's required in the absence of a variance compared to most other residential sites. These conditions set the property apart from similarly sized parcels in the city. A literal interpretation, the fourth standard, the literal interpretation of the provisions of these regulations would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district under terms of these regulations and would cause or impart unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant. Without the variance, a single-family dwelling would be required to set back 47 feet to comply with the minimum width at the building line requirement. The setback is, as staff has pointed out, 1.89 times the minimum setback required in the most R1 zoned sites. As the depth of the site is 125 feet and the standard depth for most platted sites in Cape Coral, the increased setback to achieve compliance with a minimum 80-foot width will substantially diminish the area on the site plan that accommodates the already designed pool. While general house plans for many sites could be altered with little or no additional cost borne by the owner, in this instance, the owner had already relied upon a meeting with staff and incurred documented expenses of about $100,000 toward design of the house and purchase of construction-related materials that's further discussed in Standard 5 below. The loss of the money, should a redesign be required, would constitute undue financial hardship on the applicant. The fifth standard is that the variance granted is the minimum variance that will make possible a reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. And I think it's important to keep in mind that we are talking about a reasonable use of this as opposed to what's the smallest possible home that could be built and still meet the standards. As the staff has pointed out, based on the letter of intent, Mr. Bakey and the contractor met with planning staff to discuss dimensional requirements of the site. After meeting with the staff, they believe the house could be designed to meet those dimensional requirements. A custom design was commissioned for the site consistent with the owner's needs and with the existing lot lines. It's important, I think, to also recognize that it has a low profile of 1 story at 12 to 16 feet in height when it reaches that 47-foot front setback that's at the 80-foot lot width. Even when we get to the maximum height, it's only about 24 feet high out of a possible 38 feet. The point being, 1, the house that's been designed was designed recognizing the homes that were already located there, recognizing that even with the greater setback, the home should be designed in recognition of the other homes that were around it. And so at the 80-foot width, or 47 feet setback, you'll see that it is a low profile, 12 to 16 foot, 1-story structure, and that even the 2nd story for the master bedroom there goes only to 24 feet. So it's not some immense structure that's been put on a lot that is substandard. And I'll point out, as the staff has pointed out, the lot size is not substandard. The lot size actually has been, by virtue of the lot split, was increased so that it's more than the 10,000-foot minimum lot size.
Do you mind if I ask you a factual question? I don't generally interrupt applicants.
Sure.
But I know you have a great deal of experience in this area, so I don't, I hope you don't mind. In this area, meaning presentations and land planning issues. When you're talking about planning staff, a home builder met with planning staff, you're talking about the customer service rep at the front desk or someone else?
I'm talking about Mr. Cornu, the customer service rep.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, it wasn't actually anyone other than Mr. Cornea? I'm probably mispronouncing that.
That's
Okay, thank you.
my understanding as well, that it was Mr. Cornu.
Thank you.
As I said, they filed for the building permit in November of 2021, and during that review, they ordered materials so that those would be available. They did not get the rejection until after they had ordered those materials. We provided records showing that $101,852 had been spent to date on the design and the materials associated with the house. Because it involves a custom house, the design and materials can't be transferred to another site or prospective buyer, given that substantial investment. Demonstrated by the applicant, the applicant's request constitutes the minimum variance necessary to make a reasonable use of the land at this location. A new house would be unreasonable given the expenses that have already been incurred toward construction of the proposed house, as well as the added expenses required for additional building materials and for a new design. If that variance is denied, the applicants would incur that unreasonable financial hardship for the reasons that have been outlined above. This is an exhibit that shows the details of the $101,852 costs that were paid as of August 15th. We can go through the details of that, but Mr. Bakey would be happy to answer any questions that might be related to that particular exhibit. Those details are backed up by the individual invoices that are included as an exhibit in the staff report, which has been incorporated. I don't want to belabor each individual detail. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those, or Mr. Bakey would be happy to answer those with regard to individual details.
I have some questions about that, but I think there'd be more factual questions addressed to your client.
Okay.
Thank you.
Standard number 6, that granting the variance will not change the use to one that is not permitted in the zoning district or different from other land in the same district. As pointed out in the staff report, it won't change the use of the property. It's going to be a single-family dwelling. That's the only use that's permitted in the R1 district. It won't change that to something that's prohibited in the district. And finally, that granting the variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of these regulations, and that the variance will not be injurious to the area involved or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. We submit that granting the variance is in harmony with the intent of the Land Development Code. The applicant meets all of the other dimensional requirements, including all building setbacks. The proposed front setback at 32 feet, 0.68, is over 1.3 times the minimum standard required for sites with the R1 zoning. The small area that encroaches at less than 80 foot wide, as I pointed out, is a low profile at about 12 to 16 feet in height. The variance, if it's granted, will not have an adverse effect on properties in the immediate vicinity of this site. And we submit that the applicant has met this standard as well. With regard to consistency with the comprehensive plan, the request is consistent. It meets the policy 1.15 of the future land use element, stating that land development regulations adopted to implement the comp plan will be based on or consistent with standards for uses, densities, and intensities described in the land use classifications. Table 1 shows zoning districts which are consistent with the future land use map. Table 1 shows that policy 1.15 has the R1 zoning district consistent with single-family future land use category. And policy 1.15A, the single-family residential, densities are not to exceed 4.4 units per acre, except for micro cottages, which don't apply here. The site is over 10,000 square feet in size. It follows the issuance of certificate of occupancy, will have one single-family dwelling, which equates to a density of 4.3 units per acre, less than the maximum 4.4 units per acre that are allowed by the single-family future land use category. Staff's recommendation is that the variance meets all 7 standards for considering the request, and they recommend approval. If the hearing examiner finds that all those standards for granting a variance have been met by the applicant, the staff recommends 3 conditions. Those 3 conditions are acceptable to the applicant as well. And at this time, I will introduce Mr. Bakey and ask him to correct anything that I have said that's incorrect. We've been over this a couple of times, so I hope that I have not misrepresented anything. And he'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And were the variance to be granted, I'm assuming you're in agreement that Exhibit A would be incorporated?
I'm sorry?
Were the variance to be granted, I'm assuming that you are accepting Exhibit A as proposed by staff as an exhibit. You've already incorporated the staff report,
Yes.
so I'm assuming that
Yes.
would be accurate. Okay, just
I
want to
do.
double check. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mrs. Hearing Examiner. I'm Hans Beachy, CEO from Quality Home Estate Incorporation.
Thank you. Your attorney had suggested that you be qualified as an expert for purposes of this proceeding, and I'm sure you were listening. I said that I would prefer that you state your qualifications. If your attorney would like to ask you questions in that regard, that's fine, or if you would prefer just to provide testimony, that's up to the 2 of you. Mr. Hartzell, do you want to ask him some questions, or how would you like to proceed?
Would you state your name for the record and your address?
My name Hans Beachy, Quality Home Estating Corporation, 2703 Southwest 43rd Terrace, Cape Coral 33914.
And what's your position?
My position is a CEO from Quality Home Estating Corporation. We are a construction company, general contractor, and most of our clients are people from overseas, and we help them through this, not every time easy stuff.
Who's the general contractor that works with you or for you in quality?
Maurizio Ferrara, he is co-owner from Quality Home Estating Corporation. He is the builder. He is licensed here in Cape Coral for many, many years, over 20 years with Estes, and he is an experienced professional in this area. We work together.
Are you also a licensed real estate broker?
I'm a real estate licensed broker from Florida, that's right. I'm here 10 years now, and I made progress in this area.
Going back to slides number 4 and number 5, can you briefly explain to the hearing examiner how many years, roughly how many years have you?
We're not looking at those slides. If you need technical help, okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
For me?
Thank you.
Yours,
Yes.
Okay. I was over 30 years a banker in bigger positions in Switzerland. Before I was coming here in Florida, I bought there a vacation home, and my kids would coming here. For this, we are now here. And after that, I was also starting in Switzerland already with real estate. I had a smaller company there, owned there, and with multifamily homes, etc. And then when I was coming here, I was interested in this real estate market to restart another career, practically. So now there are 14 years around what I'm in real estate business, and I'm as a real estate broker. I'm buying, selling homes for people, for clients. I have my own brokerage company here with Sun Realty, and so it was starting this idea that to put together with Maurizio Ferrara as builder to build homes for our clients. Right, I was interested to build homes a little bit in a higher quality, better improvements, or I don't know how can I tell you. The request from the client was a little bit different than usual. I saw this also with American clients. Many people like also our houses like this, where it's starting another area. They like this new, modern stuff a little bit more, and we are maybe only one who was stepping in this area. And now when you see on the market in real estate, you see other companies doing similar things. They're starting to do what we are doing in the last 5 years, actually.
With regard to this particular exhibit on sheet number 4, did you prepare the information and prepare that exhibit?
Yes, absolutely.
Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate, yeah.
Okay. And then looking at the second exhibit, which is the builder review, Did you also prepare that exhibit?
Yes, I prepared this together with Maurizio Ferrara. We have this to do every times when we have clients who needs financing, then we have to give this information to the banks, etc. So this is an actual list what we use.
And that list is accurate with regard to the number of homes that you have previously constructed and finished or that are presently under construction?
Yes,
Your business?
absolutely correct.
Okay. I would proffer Mr. Bakey as an expert in
Thank you. We can, I'm
home building.
not completely sure the clerk can pick up your request, but basically you're asking that Mr. Bakey be considered as an expert at this time, correct?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Bakey, can you tell me a little bit about your educational background, sir?
I graduated in different areas. First was I was in Switzerland still. I was a hotelier. That means I'm was capable to guide or to guide a hotel in the hotel industry. Then I changed to the background with offices. I liked the staff from working in the office, and so for this I was doing economy and financing. So I graduated in these areas too in Switzerland. So, and I made also higher education in banking industry too. Then, and I was ending there as a member of the board from a middle bank, in a middle size bank in Switzerland. So this was my school background.
Okay, thank you. I will find you as an expert based upon what you've provided in writing and also based upon your testimony this morning.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have questions for your client, or how do you want to proceed, Mr. Hartzell?
No, I just, for the record, wanted Mr. Bakey to confirm that what I had presented was an accurate representation of the facts.
Okay, and did he actually say that? I'm not sure he said that yet.
What was it?
The
Did my
question is-
presentation accurately represent the facts as you have presented them to me?
Absolutely, this is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
If you have any questions, otherwise, at this time, I will sit down and wait for the staff and the public.
I have no other questions. Did you want to have Mr. Ferrara testify regarding his qualifications, or are you not requesting he be an expert? It's up to you.
What I will do is, to the extent that there are questions that come up about contracting or construction, if you have any questions about that, I will qualify him at that time, rather than going through that process right now.
All right, do you want him to testify that what you've proffered is true and accurate?
Thank you, I will do that.
All right.
State your name and address for the record.
Maurizio Ferrara. My address is 3417 Southwest 15th Place,
And,
Cape Coral?
Cape Coral. Yes.
Thank you.
and what is your occupation?
Builder.
Okay.
Co-
What's your company?
Ferrara Construction Services.
And what's your position in that company?
Owner, CEO.
Okay. And are you licensed in that field?
Yes.
What is your license, if you'll explain to them?
Residence builder.
Is that a license in the city of Cape Coral?
Yes. State of Florida.
State of Florida? Is that a general contractor's license?
It's a residence. It's RES.
I think he's testified it's a residence contractor only, not a
Contractor,
GC.
yes.
I'm sorry, residential.
Yeah.
Have you seen this slide number 4
Yes.
and the information that's presented on
Yes.
it? Is that accurate with regard to
Yes.
the information presented for you?
Yes.
And looking at the information on slide number 5, does that accurately represent the construction and the work that you have done with Quality Estate Home and Mr. Bakey as part of that business?
Yes.
And finally, with regard to the presentation that I have just made, is the information in that presentation correct and accurate with regard to what you and Mr. Bakey have provided to me?
Yes.
Are there any corrections in that you've heard? Did I say anything
No.
inaccurately?
No.
At this time, I would proffer Mr. Ferrara as an expert in residential contracting.
Mr. Ferrara, can you tell me about your educational background, please, sir?
Yes, I grew up in Michigan. I was born in Italy. We moved to Michigan when I was 7. So I went to high school. We went to college, got association degree. But all the times we went to construction. So at 18, I started working with my brother as a mason. So I was always in mason construction field. I got my builder license in Michigan. We worked in Michigan. We did a lot of homes there. And one year we came here on vacation and we loved it, and we ended up moving down to Florida. And I got my builder license here in the state of Florida.
Being a mason in Michigan must be pretty tough in the wintertime, I think.
Yeah, so that was tough.
Thank you. I will accept you as an expert. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Hartzell?
No, ma'am. At this time, I'll defer to the staff.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Struve, thank you.
For the record, Mike Struve, Planning Team Coordinator with the City Planning Division. And for the purposes of this hearing, I'm requesting that I be recognized as an expert in the area of land use planning based on my credentials on file with the City Clerk's Office and my past testimony before you on similar matters.
Thank you, Mr. Struve. I will find you as an expert based upon your past testimony in cases that have issues similar to those being presented in this case, and also based upon your CV, which is of record with the city clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go over some of the background a little bit more quickly than usual, but I still want to cover that and certainly want to cover our analysis of this case too. So this is a privately initiated variance request. The owner is WNCC Incorporation. You've already heard from Mr. Hartzell and his team. The owner is requesting a variance in this case of 8.69 feet to the minimum 80-foot lot width at the building line requirement as required by Table 4.1.3B in the Land Development Code, which would allow the single-family home that you've heard about earlier to be constructed with a lot width of 71.31 feet. The site is in western Cape Coral and at 2726 Southwest 38th Terrace. And you've seen this aerial map before. You see the subject site here, which currently is unimproved and has frontage in Southwest 38th Terrace, has water frontage along a saltwater canal. You'll notice this is an area of the city that is largely built out with single-family homes, although you do see a few unimproved lots scattered throughout as well.
Do you mind if I interrupt you with questions? Will that be
Absolutely not.
disruptive? I have no questions on this slide.
Okay.
No,
All right.
We're good on
That's
this
just a
slide.
warning, is that right?
It
All
was
right.
an inquiry. Thank you.
The site and all surrounding sites have a single-family future land use classification and single-family residential or R1 zoning. And the site is just a little over 10,000 square feet, 10,087. And the site was split from a larger parent tract, which at the time consisted of a couple of lots back in 2004. And the current owner of the site is about 3 owners removed from the original owner, and we provided a timeline in terms of when the lot was acquired, and then when it was split, and then when it was passed or conveyed to a different owner. That action was common back during those times. In 2015, we were able to work out a mutually satisfactory arrangement with Lee County where we would review such splits, and they basically agreed at that time to no longer allow people to come before them seeking to split a property, and instead, if to the extent that that occurred, they would send them back to us first and make sure that we had processed them with an application that we developed to make sure that this type of situation didn't happen or certainly was minimized. And there's been other problems in the past too with these types of splits in terms of sometimes there are setback violations that occur, particularly with marine improvements if someone is splitting a larger site. So that has largely been successful, but we are still dealing with some of the remnants from some of these properties that were split years ago, and they do continue to create some problems.
As Mr. Hartzell indicated, I was curious how the adjacent house could have been constructed, but that's shrouded in the mists of the past, I suppose.
I have also been a little likewise curious about that. Our staff report did mention that there was I believe we mentioned that there was a variance application for that site that was denied. So that accounts for, in my view, certainly the house being constructed past the 25-foot setback, but when you look at the aerial of the site, it looks like the house is not at all close to obtaining that minimum 80-foot width at the building line requirement. So I can't explain that adequately, and there's nothing that I could find in our files that indicated what might have happened to have allowed the building to occur at that particular point, particularly given the fact that the variance was denied.
Understood. I appreciate those comments. Go ahead.
Okay. I think you've seen a diagram similar to this previously. I do want to walk through this again because it is pretty important. So this is a design of the site that was, and what you see here on the side was clipped from that design provided by the applicant. And this solid red line that you see here would be where a house, if it was built at or behind that line, would comply with the minimum lot width requirement of 80 feet. The dashed line, and this would here, based on our calculations, and I think I heard Mr. Hartzell maybe even mention a couple of different setbacks, but we had calculated that the setback to achieve compliance with the 80-foot lot width requirement would equate to a setback of about a little over 47 feet. This dashed red line here is where the applicant is proposing to construct this single-family home. And that would equate to a lot width of 71.31 feet. And so the variance that's being requested is the difference or the delta between 80 and 71.31 feet, or 8.69 feet. I want to emphasize here that this is not a setback variance that the applicant is seeking per se, and in fact they are actually proposing to build beyond or with a greater setback than what the code would normally require if you had 80 feet on your lot to begin with at that 25-foot setback. So now I'm going to walk through the 7 standards that we analyzed for this case. There's going to be some redundancy here, but I want to make sure that we get our analysis on the record.
I'm
as
sorry,
well.
can we go back to the prior slide?
Yes,
The lot line goes to the seawall, or no? I'm seeing the PUE and the 6-foot PUE in there.
yes. So this would be, the seawall represents this would be the south or rear property line. And what you're seeing here is the 6-foot perimeter easement
Got it.
along the boundary of the site.
So it wouldn't be a candidate for a vacation, hypothetically? Wouldn't be appropriate, okay. Not asking you to speculate, I'm just talking out loud.
Well, whether or not it would be whether it be a candidate for a vacation or not, what would come into play before you ever vacated this would be a rear setback infringement if you pushed the house back further, given their current site design.
I understand, thank you.
So looking at the 7 special or standards that staff uses for evaluating variance requests, the first are there special conditions and circumstances that exist that are peculiar to the land, structure, or buildings involved, which are not applicable to other lands, and looking at other lands within the same zoning district, in this case the R1 zoning district. The site is irregular from a previous split from a parent track, again going back to 2004. The site does have adequate area and depth, but it does lack the required width at the 25-foot setback line. And in staff's view, that does separate it apart from the vast majority of other lots in Cape Coral that can achieve that 80-foot setback or 80-foot width at the building line requirement for properties in the R1 zoning district. So staff finds that this standard has been met. And before I go on, I do want to mention too that our findings here, again, are recommended findings. So when we say staff, the standard has been met by the applicant, that is a recommended finding. We realize that the hearing examiner is a final arbiter in making that determination.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Second standard is that special conditions and circumstances do not result from actions of the applicant. The parent property was split by a previous owner in 2004, and then it changed hands, I think, about 3 times before the current owner acquired the site more recently. To our knowledge, the current owner was apparently unaware of potential problems created with the lot split, meaning that there was an issue with being able to achieve the required 80-foot wide lot width at the normal setback line. And since the lot was altered by a previous owner and not the existing owner, staff finds that special circumstances do exist. So we find that this standard has been met as well.
Can we go back to the second one?
Yes.
I appreciate what you're saying, special conditions and circumstances, but by coming forward with this particular design, is that not technically an action of the applicant?
Yes. So it would be, because the design presumably, it's the owner's design. Where we find that there are special circumstances is that, to our knowledge, the applicant was unaware of this deficiency in the lot, and because of discussions that they had had with staff, thought that they were fine with moving ahead with a design that was discussed by staff at the front counter.
I
So
understand.
yes, you're right in that sense.
I'm sorry. I understand what you're saying. And it's unfortunate that the customer service rep is not present or not available to testify. But maybe this is an appropriate time to get into that. What is the normal protocol with the city in terms of customer service rep? Do they give answers like this? Do they do other things? Do they pass it along to someone else?
In cases like this, if there is a question that a customer service rep has, they are generally instructed to approach a planner to help them if it's a planning-related issue. I think generally that happens, but I don't think in all cases that probably does happen. And there's a wide variation in how different customer representatives would handle that situation. I'm not making any excuses for staff. It is a pretty fast-moving environment, sometimes working at the counter, and sometimes staff may feel under pressure to give an answer at that moment without checking. That's also something that we strongly discourage people from doing, but sometimes that happens. The other, and again, since I wasn't present for these discussions, I'm just going to say right now I'm speculating a little bit, but there could have been a language issue too with Mr. Cornu and Mr. Ferraro as well. Besides there's just being some general misunderstanding of under the best of circumstances too. So there could have been again, I'm speculating, there could have been a confluence of factors that caused either Mr. Cornu to say, I've looked at this, there should be no issues with this requirement, or if you're meeting your setbacks, you're fine because it has a sufficient lot area, you have the depth that's necessary, or he could have said something different that was interpreted differently too.
I know,
So I'm not trying to dance around your question.
Well, it's impossible for you to answer it because you weren't there and he's not here. So is it the norm for customer service representatives to document their conversations? Probably not, given what you're saying.
It is not, yeah. We keep a log of the people that check in, so we could go back in our records generally and see that Mr. Smith signed in to see someone at the front counter back in January 20th, but we generally do not require our customer service reps to document every conversation and write a little summary of what was discussed and what was decided.
And there's no record of any signing in to see a higher level planning person in this case that you know of?
Not that I know of. And normally those logs would indicate, for example, who came to the counter and who they saw. We have a couple of different customer reps. It would not necessarily reflect, though, if Mr. Cornu or any other customer service rep went back and got a planner and asked him to come up to the counter, because that person, he or she, would not log in, would not be required to log in to provide assistance on a matter.
Understood. All right. And I apologize for asking you to speculate because, as I said before, you weren't there, and apparently there does not appear to be any city record regarding that matter. But
Yeah,
okay.
regretfully.
All right. Thank you. Let's move forward when you're ready. Thank
Okay.
you.
Third, the granting of the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by these regulations to other lands, buildings, or structures in the same zoning district. In this case, the narrowness of the site combined with the minimum width at the building line requirement contributes to a greater setback for the property in the absence of a variance, and not only contributes to a greater setback, but in our view, a substantially greater setback to comply with that lot width requirement. So staff finds that this standard has been met as well. Fourth, that the literal interpretation of the provisions of the regulations would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district under the terms of these regulations and would cause or impart unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant. So based on our calculation, if the applicant was to comply fully with the requirement or be denied in the variance, which in case then they would have to meet that minimum lot width requirement, that would equate to a building setback of somewhere in the neighborhood of 47 feet. In our view, what sets this apart from other similar requests, not that we've had that many of them either, but there have been plans for a custom home that the applicant has not just provided to us, but have provided us with documented expenses for both soft and hard costs, meaning for the design of the home as well as for actual materials that would be used in the construction of the house.
And if I can interrupt you again, once again, I apologize for that. Is it your experience that people commonly go out and spend $100,000 before getting a building permit for expenses like trusses and cabinets and flooring, et cetera? I realize you're on this side of the fence, so that you may not
Yeah,
be-
I am a little bit on the other side of the fence, so I don't know how common that is. I just don't. One thing that I had talked to I think I had met with Mr. Ferraro well after they had submitted the application, and he stopped by to check to see on how the application was proceeding and where we were in the drafting of the staff report. And I think he had told me this, at least it was my understanding, that one thing that came into play here, or maybe it was in some of the written material I reviewed, that because of COVID and issues with supply chains and so on, people in this case might have been a little more willing to assume a little risk, so they would have the materials on site and mobilized so they could begin construction rather than wait for the permit and then order those materials and then have a longer wait on top of that. So again, it's more risk than certainly someone like myself would take, given the dollar amount involved, but that was something that I believe that I was either told or had read.
And the reason I asked you that was I was looking at the timeline that was provided, and the cabinets, windows, and doors, which are over half the cost, the $100,000 cost that is referenced by the applicant, were apparently ordered and or paid for subsequent to the application for the permit on November 8th. One was on November 29th. That was the cabinets for $18,460. The windows and doors were $1,229, and that was $34,814. And then the pool, I'm showing that was, I don't have a specific date on that, I didn't copy it out. But the reason I'm asking you this, and I realize that it's more of a question for the applicant than for staff, but it is some of the proposed factual documentation that would support your recommendation on number 4. And I think that the city, I'm going to ask our assistant city attorney this question, we do have a provision in the city code that says anything that's started prior to the issuance of a building permit is at the sole risk of the applicant. Did I get that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
A miracle by itself. Thank you very much. Not the factual, but my recollection of it. All right. So, all right. Those are my comments on that.
Okay.
And if you want to move forward, that's fine. Or if you have further comments on this number 4, that's fine too.
No, again, I don't have any comments unless you have any other questions on that.
So hypothetically, if there were an issue that did not involve a variance, the fact that the applicant had spent money before the building permit was issued would not be something that would be addressed by the city, is that correct, based upon the city code? If there
No.
are no variants at play here?
Yeah, absolutely not. If someone wants to go out and acquire materials while they have a permit being reviewed, the applicant would assume that risk. We have people that submit site plans to us with some regularity while they're still having their subdivision plans reviewed before us. We have people that come in with building permits before they have a site plan that's been approved. We don't recommend that, but people are doing that in an effort to try to save time, because for builders, time is money. But they also understand that they do that with risk. So it's a risk-reward type of thing at the end of the day.
Understood. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't have any other questions on the standard.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on to standard number 5, that the variance granted is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. As Mr. Hartzell went into some detail, there was a meeting with city staff, with one of our customer service representatives, and following that meeting, a single-family residence was designed for the site. Materials were ordered so construction could begin while a permit was being reviewed. So I want to make sure that we have that on the record. In this case, again, since there has been a substantial expenditure of money and the project is a custom home, in our view, designed for a specific site for a particular client, that design and materials cannot be easily, in our view, transferred to another site, assuming that the owner could find another site that he wanted. If this was a situation where, and sometimes this occurs too, particularly when lots are split, sometimes the owner owns the adjacent site as well too, and certainly in those cases we would say either go back and recombine your properties, or in the case of a situation where there might be platted lots where there might be an issue with a dimensional requirement, in that case you could come in and potentially split, if it's an oversized lot, part of your property and add it to your deficient lot on the other side of you. This is not one of those situations, because there are other owners involved on both sides of the other property. Just wanted to sort of give you an idea of how some conversations have gone in the past when this has been encountered more closely to when the actual split of the property has occurred.
Thank you.
In our view, the requested variance is the minimum variance needed to make reasonable use of the land, given that this is a custom home with product already ordered, and that is designed to fit onto this property. So staff does find that this standard has been met as well. 6, whether the granting of the variance will not change, or I'm sorry, the granting of the variance will not change the use to one that is not permitted in the zoning district or different from other land in the same zoning district. So this is not a situation where someone is seeking what we sometimes refer to as a use variance, a use that's not allowed clearly in the zoning district. So this variance would have no impact in changing the use proposed to one that's prohibited in the zoning district. 7, and lastly, will the granting of the variance be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of the regulations, and that the variance will not be injurious to the area involved or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare? The design for the house shows a front setback of 32.68 feet. If the variance is granted, that would be the closest that the house could be constructed to the front property line. With the exception of the one house to the west, which was built considerably farther from the front property line, somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 to 50 feet. the construction of this house with a setback for around 32 feet will more or less be in line with the other houses in the area that, in some scaling that I have done, show that those houses have setbacks somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 feet for the most part, with the one outlier being the one immediately to the west. Because of that, staff finds that the variance will not have an adverse effect on properties in the immediate area. It will help to promote sort of a uniform or consistent building line up and down the block in the absence of that one house to the west. And we find that the variance would be in harmony with the intent and the purpose of the LDC, and we find that the standard has been met as well. This application is consistent with policy 1.15 of the Land Development Code, and that is that the R1 zoning of the site is consistent with the single-family feature land use classification. And following the construction of one single-family home on the site would have a density of about 4.3 dwelling units per acre, which is just under the maximum density allowed in the single-family feature land use classification of 4.4 dwelling units per acre. Staff is recommending approval of this variance with conditions that I'll read into the record in a moment. We have had technically 6 letters and 1 email in opposition to this request, and I think you have copies of all of that. The applicant does as well.
Thank you. Yes, I do.
And the 3 conditions of approval that staff is recommending are: 1, the variance grants the property owner relief from the minimum 80-foot lot width at the building line requirement. This variance does not grant the applicant relief from any other dimensional standard appearing in the Land Development Code for the R1 district. 2, the petitioner shall reimburse the City of Cape Coral for the cost of recording this variance with the Office of the Lee County Clerk of Court. And then 3, the city shall record this resolution with the Office of the Lee County Clerk of Court following the receipt of the recording fees from the petitioner. And if you have questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them now or later.
I do. Did you want to modify your first condition to incorporate the exhibit to show where the exact variance would be? You had provided Exhibit A, and I didn't see that.
Yes, I think that would provide more certainty. So, for example, at the 71, let me go back here real quick. At the 71.31 point, at the point of the lot where you have 71.31 feet of width or greater in that case. So yes, I would recommend that that condition be revised or amended to reflect that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I have no other questions at this time.
All right, and I would like to request that our staff report be incorporated into our presentation this morning.
Okay, will do. Thank you very much. All right, this is a public hearing. Are there members of the public who wish to provide as testimony or input? I did see several hands when the could you, Mr. Struby, could you amend what's up on the screen to maybe show the property? Would that be appropriate?
Certainly.
I saw a couple of hands when we were originally swearing people in, so ma'am, if you want to come up, you're welcome to testify over here. It's really for your safety and convenience. All right. Over there where the podium is? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Oh, over there.
Yep.
Your Honor, I know there was at least one late walk-in. Were they all sworn in? I don't know. All 3?
Thank you.
Okay.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that update. Ma'am, were you sworn in when you came in?
Yes,
All right, and could you state your name for the record, please?
my name is Pamela Graham.
And this is your opportunity to tell me whatever it is that you want to tell me. Thank you.
Okay, I live north of the lot that in question, so right across the street. I'm an 11-year full-time resident of Cape Coral, and I'm not an expert. I'm just a neighbor. My objection to this is it's not following the guidelines that have already been set up for the city of Cape Coral and instituted for all other neighbors in this neighborhood. The lot size should be taken into consideration when anyone plans on building a structure. I don't feel it's appropriate to plan a house size and then come and say, well, it's not going to fit on the lot, so let's change the lot to fit the builder's needs. I'm a little confused as to, there's no record of a conversation so important that led this builder to go ahead with plans that clearly were not approved for the size lot. A customer service rep would certainly not have authority to approve anything, and being expert builders, I've previously testified, I would expect them to know all the requirements and protocols before they advise a client on a size of a house, a structure. I would expect that from an experienced builder. I don't feel it's relevant that purchasing all kinds of cabinets and other things before you're approved should be a condition to approve going against the zoning requirements. As stated, that's the risk that an owner takes. Permits are issued, and if we want to go against and not follow the permit and buy things ahead of time without approval, we shouldn't be responsible afterwards if it's not approved. And we shouldn't change zoning regulations because it leads to a precedent of, well, I'm not going to wait for my permit. I think I'll just go get the supplies and, oh, well. I don't feel that should be in any way considered part of the approval process. I'm also confused because I have a letter dated July 12th, City Planning Division case report, that denies this based on all 7 were not approved. Standards were not met. The letter that I got off the site says that number 5 was not met in a letter dated July 12th. So I was basing some of the disapproval on the fact that staff denied it, and now I'm seeing it's approved, so I'm a little confused on that. Other than that, I just feel that building a house too big for a lot is a precedent that I don't think we want to go forward with. And I recommend that this be denied.
Thank you for your comments, and thank you for taking the time to come in today.
Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to testify? Sir, come on up. Were you sworn in, sir?
Hello?
Were you sworn in?
Yes, I was.
All right, would you state your name for the record, please, sir?
My name's Ross Gosnell.
Could you spell, I'm sorry, could you spell your last name?
I'm sorry, Gosnell.
Thank you.
I'm one of the 7 letters that came in.
I recognize your name, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of things I want to say. I live, my property's 1 lot removed from the property in question. I'm to the west and north of the property. My property line is 40 feet from the planned setback, so I'm really on top of that. The questions, one of the things that the builders and the attorney talked about was the drawings they showed and all those interesting things. One of the drawings that I expected to see, which I didn't see, was a 3-dimensional perspective that shows the house on each side of the planned property. And if you look at that carefully and you see a view from that dimension, you can see that house kind of blocks out the house to the west, and it doesn't have that much of an impact on the house to to east, but it does cut off, takes into consideration, takes off about 4 feet of property space on both sides. So it's going to really change the look and feel of the neighborhood because it's not consistent or common with the rest of the houses in the area. I'm surprised they didn't show that 3D perspective. I thought that was pretty common. I'm not going to go through all the variance issues that we had. Pam talked about those things, how they were, it was denied in October, or I mean in July, and now they're saying it's approved. But the bottom line is that what they're trying to do is shoehorn a house into a lot that wasn't big enough for this house. Since they talked about historical items, when the house was purchased, the owner was talking to the neighbors, and the applicant was talking to the neighbors, and he was talking about what a great deal they got on the lot. And the reason they got a great deal, because the house was it wasn't shaped right. There was plenty of other lots that would adequately fit this lot house they're planning on. But there's still plenty of houses like that, lots like that in the area, but they were so happy to get the house, irregularly shaped house, which priced down because it wasn't selling, and they got a good deal on the house. So they got a good deal on the lot. So they saved a lot of money buying that lot that was too small for the normal construction. The lot itself, as it stands, can adequately build. You can adequately build the house, and we're not opposed to that. We like to see all these houses built there, but the fact that they're trying to shoehorn a house in that's too big, take property from the people that live on the west, the people that live on the east, change the setback. I mean, that's really goes against the grain of the harmony of the neighborhood. So as for those reasons in particular, we're opposed to that.
Anything else? Thank you very much for your comments, and thank you for coming in today. I appreciate you taking the time, sir. All right? Is there anybody else that wants to testify in public comment? Seeing no one, I'll close the public comment section of the public hearing, take it back to the applicant. Mr. Hartzell, you're up, sir. Thank you. This would be appropriate, if you wish, to incorporate the staff testimony, if you still wish to do that.
Yes, I would like to incorporate the staff presentation
All right,
and testimony.
done. Thank you.
For the record, Steve Hartzell. Let me address some of the comments that were in the letters and comments that were reiterated today by a couple of the members of the public. The primary concern seems to have been that the house is too big for the lot. That was stated twice today. And that it shows that the applicants, that the variance shows that the applicants are overbuilding on the lot. I think it's important to recognize that Land Development Code Table 4.1.3.b requires a minimum 10,000 square foot lot. And as has been testified and is in the record with the survey and the other materials, this lot size is over 10,000 square feet. The lot split, although it was not properly done back in 2004, results in this particular lot being an adequate lot size. That table, 4.1.3.b, also requires a maximum 60% impervious coverage. And as the materials demonstrate, and I can take you back through them, but there's a table that's part of the site plan that shows that this particular house is designed at less than 60%. It's designed at 53.3% of impervious area. So with regard to the objection that the variance is a request to allow a house that's too big for this lot, that's not correct. That's controverted by the evidence that's in the record and by the Land Development Code. There's speculation that Mr. Gosnell just made about the cost of the lot. Property appraiser's website, which I would ask you to take judicial notice of, demonstrates that this lot was purchased for $143,000 back in 2018. The vacant lot to the east of this property, 2 doors to the east of this property, next door is a house, and then next to that, is comparably valued right now at $159,000, just like the rest of the lots in this neighborhood. This is a comparably priced lot. This wasn't purchased on the cheap, as has been suggested. Folks, I believe in the letters that you received, you'll see that the same comments appear on a regularly repeated, indicated that the variance will move the front setback substantially closer to the street so that the home will stick out, I think a couple of the letters said, like a sore thumb. As you can see by the evidence, the home is designed just the opposite of that. It will not stick out greater than the other homes in the neighborhood. It's going to have a greater front setback than the minimum 25 feet. It was mentioned that this variance requires obtaining land from lots on the east and west. Somehow the implication seems to be that what's proposed is that somehow we're going to impact the neighbors on the east or the west with regard to their property. That's not the case. As you're well aware, you can see that the lot split has already occurred. And as Mr. Struve testified, there is no ability to obtain additional land from the other side of this improper lot split, nor from the neighbor to the east, because their home is already built on this. However, the house was specifically designed to take into account the unusual shape of this property so that the setbacks of the house from those adjacent property lines meets the required setbacks, so that this house not only is of a size that meets the code, it meets setbacks so that it doesn't encroach into either of the west or the east neighbors' lots or have an undue impact on them. So it doesn't require land from the east or the west, and it doesn't require setbacks.
May I interrupt you? And I apologize for
Yeah.
this. I believe that one of the people at public comment referenced a view corridor from one, didn't use those words because I would assume he's not a professional in this arena. But he referenced a view corridor from the west, I believe the west property would be impacted by the property. I don't know if that's true. I'm just asking, is that to respond to that?
With regard to that, as he pointed out, the view corridor from the property on the east is not impacted. This house will be set back greater than the property on the east. And in particular, we've also pointed out with regard to view corridors that the design of the house is such that it will be one story at the 80-foot, where the lot width is 71 feet and change at the front setback, it will only be a one-story home. So with regard to view corridors, it's been designed in a way that actually reduces, for that 8.69 feet, reduces the height of the structure so that it does take into account the possible view corridor. As was pointed out, only the parcel to the west would be impacted there. And again, as we pointed out, the difficulty and the challenge here is that both of the parcel to the west and the subject parcel are part of an illegal lot split or an improper lot split. And this property is finally taking account of that because they just realized it. And while I'm addressing that, there's been some significant question about the member of the staff who, at the counter, who said that there won't be any problems as long as you set back more than the 25 feet and you meet all of those setbacks, and whether it's reasonable for the applicants to have accepted that presentation as being reasonable. I would point out that I submit that it was reasonable for them under all of these circumstances, and I think these are very unique circumstances. They came to the city with an unusual shaped lot and wanted to be careful before they submitted their building permit. They met with the folks at the city staff at the counter and said, what about this unusual shaped lot? Showed them the plans, got what they believed was, yes, it's okay as long as you make sure you set back, don't move it farther up front, meet the setbacks that are necessary, and it will be okay. I would submit to you that you have a perfect example of how that can happen. Look to the lot on the west. Somebody apparently, back in the past, maybe closer to the 2004 lot split, applied for a variance and was denied. And yet, the home itself is constructed, and it's constructed on a lot that doesn't meet the 80-foot width.
But we know we can't take that as a precedent in a variance application.
The point is not that it's a precedent. It is a fact that really has to be recognized in terms of how reasonable was it for my clients to meet with the city staff, and whether it was reasonable for the city staff, how did this happen? My point is, yes, it happened on the site to the west. It happened here again. Nobody recognized that the 80-foot width and the setback issue could potentially be a problem until after the building permit had been submitted. And I think that that's also an important factor with regard to the question that has been asked: how reasonable is it that these folks went out and bought materials ahead of time? In a vacuum, folks might look at this and say, gosh, I'm not sure I would have made that same decision. But we're not working in a vacuum. We're working under very unique circumstances right now in light of 2 or 3 years of very unusual circumstances. At this point in time, with the supply chain problems and the costs that are rising, weekly, monthly, these folks looked at plans that they'd taken to the city. They'd looked at them. Folks had twice said, yes, that looks fine, submit your building permit. When they submitted the building permit languished for months. Again, it's part of the unique circumstances here at this time. And at that point in time, they said, we've already looked at it with the city. This is a vacant lot. We're meeting the requirements. everybody believed they were meeting the requirements. This wasn't a case where they'd been told, you're going to have to get a variance here. What had happened to them was they'd been told, this is okay, your plans are okay. Yes, they went ahead and invested they invested a significant amount of money ahead of time. I would submit to you that under these very unusual circumstances, it was not a big risk that they believed that they were taking. It was reasonably prudent action that they believed they were taking. They're stuck with city plans that are being reviewed and taking a long time. What do? We should go ahead and secure the materials so that when the plans finally do come through, we can begin the construction. So I would submit to you that under these circumstances, that was very reasonable for them to do. The size of the home is too large for the neighborhood. Again, as I pointed out, it's consistent with the size of the homes in the rest of the neighborhood. Again, I would refer to the property appraiser's website, which I'd ask you to take judicial notice of. The Gosnells home is 2,631 square feet of base area, which is essentially the first floor coverage. The record shows that the proposed home is only 2,378 square feet of base area. Again, not looking at the square footage of the house. And the square footage of the house at something over 3,000 square feet is not a humongous house when you look at the second story and the living area that's included there. So we would submit to you that the house itself is not too big for the neighborhood. It's actually very consistent with the other houses in the neighborhood. And the fact that there is a second story, as I pointed out and the plans show, the second story only goes to 24 feet. Again, not a humongous house. It's a 38-foot height that's permissible. They went to 2/3 of that. Again, I would argue that this is very much consistent with both the code and the neighborhood. One of the letters argued that this was going to be a rental house. That's purely speculative. That's not what the owners intend. They intend it to be their vacation home. I would submit that that should not factor into the hearing examiner's considerations. You asked a question with regard to standard number 2, that the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. The special conditions and circumstances here relate to the shape of the lot. They relate to the fact that the lot was improperly split and not to the actions that the applicant has taken. The lot is shaped differently because of the improper lot split. So the special conditions and circumstances are really inherent in this particular lot. I would say that you recognize variances are unusual. They ought to be related to generally the shape of the lot. This is a perfect example, I would submit to you, of where a variance ought to be approved. This is related to the unusual shape of the lot. The house that's been designed on it will meet the requirements of the code. The only thing that's being requested for the variance is to allow this lot to only have the 80-foot minimum width in the middle of the lot, basically, not at the front setback of the structure. We would submit that these are innocent purchasers without knowledge. Their only recourse at this stage was to apply for a variance to correct a lot split that they didn't create and that they weren't involved in. The case report reflects that all 7 standards of the variance had been met. Initially, there was not enough information for the staff to find that standard number 5 had been met because they didn't have the information related to the costs that had been incurred. When that information was supplied, they found that the standard had been met. So we agree with the staff recommendation. We submit that the variance is based upon a home that was designed to meet all of the setbacks that are related to the unusual and irregular lot lines, the shape of the house, and it's the minimum variance that makes possible a reasonable use of the land. This house is compatible with all of the other homes that will be built in this neighborhood. The fact that these neighbors are objecting to the presence of a house that they believe is too big, I would submit that they have not properly understood what's being requested here. In conclusion, we believe that the variance is consistent with both the Cape Coral Plan, the Land Development Code. We would urge the hearing examiner to accept the expert opinions of the staff and the recommendations, and to approve the variance with the conditions that the staff has proposed, subject to the revision that you discussed with Mr. Struve, that this would be approved at 71 foot setback, or 71 foot width, with the 8.69 foot variance.
Thank you. I do have, I'm requesting some more testimony. It's not clear to me which of your two clients had that conversation, if, unless it was both of them, with the customer service rep. And I would like some more testimony regarding that encounter, since customer service rep was not available to testify. Was it one or both of your clients? I understand there were two conversations, so.
Yes. Mr. Ferrara? Could you state your name for the record again?
Maurizio Ferrara.
Step a little, thank you, so that it gets picked up.
Okay,
Would you explain to the hearing examiner about your meetings with Mr. Cornu?
Yeah, we came into the city, and I brought him the site plan and the lot size.
The what, I'm sorry?
The lot, the survey,
The site plan and the
site
survey?
plan and survey.
Okay, thank you.
And we talked a little bit, and I ended up even getting the engineer, my architect, on the phone with them. He talked to him, and they talked.
I'm sorry, who is your architect?
Hayden, Cinnamon Design.
Hayden Voles?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, just for the record.
And you said you're good to go as long as you're over 25 feet off the property line. And you got the setback, 7.5. That was the most important thing. And here we are.
Okay, so it was the site plan and the survey that you brought in the
Yeah,
documents?
yeah.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Herzl, based upon my inquiry of your client?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Struve, sir, thank you.
I have no further testimony unless you have any questions for me.
I have a question. There was a reference in the public testimony regarding a denial of July 12th. Can you address that?
So I think what may have happened was we had originally scheduled this case, I believe, for August 9th. I think that was a hearing date. And like we always do, we send the staff report out to the applicant well in advance of the hearing date. I met with Mr. Ferraro at the counter, and he said that he had records of expenditures that he had, that he could document, that spoke to the design of the site, the materials that he had acquired, the dates in which he had acquired those. And I had told him that was information that might have been helpful, but that was not part of your original submittal. So he said that he would put that together. And so I think that's when, at some point thereafter, Mr. Hartzell became involved. I think what had happened, since we had put together the public hearing packet for that date, and then it was delayed, was that for some reason, the updated staff report was not then switched out in what we call the Novus packet. And so I'm not disputing at all the lady that testified earlier that said that they got a staff report for denial. I think that was unfortunately an older staff report that was produced before this new information came in that we had to evaluate.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other testimony?
I do not.
All right, thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to conclude the hearing. A great deal of things to think about, and the testimony today, I will go ahead and review that and review the comments and public comment. Once again, I want to thank members of the public for attending today. I'm sorry, I can't take additional comment. I'm sorry. I know that we all have jobs and obligations and things going on in our lives, and I really appreciate everyone taking the time to attend today and participate in today's hearing. So with those comments, I am concluding the hearing. It's 11:20. I'm closing this hearing. The date and time of the next hearing is Tuesday, September 27th, 2022, 9 a.m. in council chambers for the hearing examiner hearings, and we stand adjourned at 11:20. Thank you, everyone.